So, good evening, everybody. So, thank you all for being here. And here we are. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Emergency Ordinance Number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are, I see Cynthia Neff. I see Kim Swanson. I see Jane Fogelman. Of course, Rosemary, thank you. I see Jody. I see Vito.
Yeah.
I see Jacqueline. I see Rachel. Did I miss anybody?
No, I think you got him. We'll just have to watch to see if anybody comes in
See
late.
if anybody else comes. Okay. Awesome, awesome.
I will say Julian told me earlier this afternoon he was coming, so he may pop up here in a few minutes, as well as Bill Love. Anyway.
Okay. The persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Places29 Hydraulic Community Advisory Committee and Albemarle County Community Development Department staff. The opportunities for the public to access and to participate in an electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. Please note that the chat is disabled. If you send something in the chat, this is sent to the meeting administrator. To ask a question or share a comment, use the raise hand feature to indicate that you would like to speak. Our county staff that are present tonight for this meeting, we do have Carolyn Schaefer. Okay, I'm sorry. And is it Falkenstein? Rachel Falkenstein? Is Ryan, I thought I saw Ryan Davidson. Yes, I did. Ryan Davidson and Gabe Daly. Thank you. And please note that Julian Bivens has joined us, as well as Chris Rimbold. All righty. So at this time, we will call for any members of the committee that have, reviewed the minutes, and if there are any corrections at this time for our April 2022 meeting minutes.
Not me. I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Thank you, Cynthia. Is there a second? Thank you, Chris Rimbold. I saw your hand first. Thank you for seconding it. So our minutes have been reviewed. The motion has been passed. And so let's see. We've adopted the minutes. So let's see. Yep. Now we just need y'all to say, yes, you accept. You can come off mute and just say, yes, I accept.
Yes, I accept.
Yep, I accept.
Aye.
Awesome. I saw 2 thumbs from Rosemary. Gotcha. The meetings it's been properly moved. So we have our April 2022 meeting minutes. All righty. At this time, I will turn the screen floor over to Deputy Chief of Budget, Ryan Davidson.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna share my screen here. Make sure I'm doing the right one. Okay. And oops. Helps if you start on the right slide. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Ryan Davidson. I'm the Deputy Chief of Budget for the county, and I'm going to hopefully go through about 15 slides here, next 10 minutes or so, to give you an overview of the county's FY23 adopted budget. I have a hard time seeing anyone, so feel free to ask questions, hold questions till the end, or if you have questions as I'm going through, feel free to jump in and interrupt. But as I said, I have a hard time seeing, so you just go ahead and speak up, and I'll answer them as I can. So real quick, the FY23 budget process was adopted following 7 public budget work sessions, a series of public hearings, and some town halls held by board members. But the work really began this last fall when the board held the policy discussions during the 5-year financial planning process. We wanted to let you know all the meetings and public areas of public contact and interaction that we've had throughout this process. We're going to start by looking at the FY23 total for the all funds budget. This is the all funds budget value, kind of incorporates every fund the county maintains, including the general fund, the county's general fund, the school funds, all the grant funds, the debt funds, other operating funds, special operating funds, and the capital funds. Typically, we talk in terms of the general fund because these funds can be highly variable when we look at the all funds from year to year. As an example, for FY23 budget, that includes about $12 million in remaining one-time funding through the American Rescue Plan Act. And additionally, there's, with the nature of the borrowing for the capital, there's a big fluctuation from year to year on those type of things. And so, as I said, typically the general fund tends to be the more useful year-to-year comparison point, and that's where we're going to focus the majority of this presentation. And because it's where all the tax revenue is received, and it's the primary ongoing source of school and county operating funds, as well as funding for the debt and capital. As I said, we're going to spend the majority of our focus on the general fund, but before we do, I just wanted to take a second to show you the CIP graphic. You can see the fluctuation in the capital budget here. In different years, the capital budget increases or decreases due to the timing of the projects and the timing of the debt issuance to support the projects we're undertaking. But as you can see, one of the things I wanted to point out, one of the main reasons, if you look at the overall value of the capital budget, the FY23 capital budget is the largest to date in terms of projected expenditures that we have. We'll go into some of this in a little more, some of these projects in a little more detail later, but this is just before we really dove into the general fund, I wanted to show this, this graphic. Now we're going to turn our focus over to the general fund, starting with the general fund revenues. The general fund revenues for fiscal year 23 are estimated at approximately $368.2 million. The general fund budget was built on maintaining the current real estate tax rate of 85.4 cents per $100 of assessed value, the same as calendar year 21, as well as some other revenue adjustments that we're going to look at and we'll talk about in a moment. But as you can see, the main source of general fund income or revenue is from general property taxes, as well as some other local taxes, with smaller sections from state revenues, other local revenues, federal, and some transfers and uses of fund balance. When looking at the general fund revenue growth trend, the revenues in recent history, we're seeing an increasing trend steadily increasing trend from 17 to 20. The gold line here is the trend line for how we might have expected our revenues to grow over time had that trend continued. Of course, like everything else, the past several years, these trends were impacted by COVID-19, wreaked havoc on any type of extrapolation of trends. And that sustained growth we were seeing took a downward turn starting in 21. But when we continue to extend that trend out, out to 23, you can see that we're just slightly behind where we might have projected revenues to be at that time. And what this is trying to demonstrate is that the level of economic recovery we're now starting to see within the county. And so FY22, the first light blue line, that was based off of the COVID numbers we were seeing and the trends we were seeing and through the first 3 quarters of 21. Well, as we got into after the budget was adopted and we got into FY22 a little bit, we realized that fourth quarter of FY21 and the first 2 quarters of FY22 were showing much stronger revenue growth than we had anticipated. And so what happened was in December of 21, as part of the county's financial management strategy, the Board of Supervisors approved a budget amendment, and that was approximately 8.2% above what we had initially adopted. And then when we got into FY23, we looked at that and we saw these trends continuing, and the FY23 budget is approximately 8.1% over that FY22 budget. And all this is just a really long-winded way of saying that we're starting to recover. We're starting to get back to that initial trend we were seeing through 17 through 20. We're not out of the woods yet. Another large surge could always definitely affect us. There's still unknowns on the way this inflation is going to affect the budgets and our revenues. And so there's a lot of things that are still out there that we're continuously monitoring and looking at when we're looking at our revenues. So I want to talk about revenue diversification for a minute. A few slides ago, I showed you the major categories for the revenue in the county, and the impact of each of those sources on an individual or a household's bottom line is different. So what this table is showing is the growth in the share of the local revenues that were coming from real property tax, real estate and personal property, from 2007 to 2022. And as you can see, there's a continued trend of growth in reliance on those particular sources. This growth and the new enabling authority from the state to make some changes in a few different revenue categories led to our recommendation to increase the food and beverage, meals, and the lodging tax, as well as considering the tax rates in relative to other cities and counties in the Commonwealth. This has the effect of by adopting these, we were able to diversify the local revenues and to reduce the reliance on real estate and broaden the impact of these activities related to the visitors to our community who stay here and shifting some of that tax burden away from our residents. So how do we achieve that diversification and that balance in the budget? Well, that's what we're trying to spell out here in this slide. First of all, the real property tax. We kept that level and remained the same as the current rate. And we included, one of the things we've included was the full year of benefit from the recently enacted cigarette tax, which started in January. So in FY22, there was only a half year worth of revenue coming in. We have additional revenue from that coming in 23. We get the benefit of a full year of that tax. Also, the Board of Supervisors recently enacted the plastic bag tax as part of the FY23 adopted budget. One of the largest changes in this diversification effort was the personal property tax rate, which was reduced by 86 cents to $3.42 per $100 evaluation. This was due to the spike in used car values seen nationwide, and this property tax rate also applies to business personal property tax. So it also has a positive effect on the impact for both residents and the businesses. And when looking at this, the county really looked at the personal property tax because whether you rent or own your house, the personal property tax, that would affect how you would feel the real estate, a change in the real estate rate. However, whether you rent or own, if you own that vehicle, you're still going to see that everyone's going to see the value of the reduction in the personal property tax rate. The board also approved the food and beverage or the meals tax increasing by 2%, and the food and the lodging tax going up by approximately 3%. Which will more closely align us with the rates being charged by the city of Charlottesville, as well as some other localities in the city. And again, further that revenue diversification and shifting burden from only our residents and our citizens to those who are coming in and enjoying and visiting our area and enjoying the services we provide on a smaller scale. So that kind of covers the revenues, and the balance of the presentation. We're going to focus on the general fund expenditures, which is what funds the county government and our partnerships with the community and all of our partner agencies. This is a nice graphic that shows some of our services, but I always have to caution at one point in time, these circles did represent the amount of funding and expenditures. But things have changed over time, and this hasn't been rescaled in terms of the expenditures. So don't think that just because fire rescue has the biggest circle on there, they're getting the biggest piece of the pie. It's just how it happened to come out on on that because I know there's, the reason I bring that up is because there's some people who have been following this budget for years and really remember when this really was predictive in that way. And hopefully we'll get that graphic fixed so that in the future it'll be little more representative.
So who is the biggest recipient?
So not on here, absent is the schools. But public safety combined is probably the largest. I will get to that in just 1 second. On my next graphic, that was a great segue to my next slide,
Welcome.
which shows, in balance with the revenues, we have 368.2 million in our expenditures. Largest chunk of that is our transfer to the schools, followed by public safety, then transfers to CIP and debt and health and welfare, which is our social services and some of our other community agencies. But police and fire, it's slipping my mind right now, but the two of them are the two largest individual departments in terms of expenditures, but they're also two of the heaviest departments in our people capital and the employees that we have within those departments. That tends to drive expenditures in the county budget more than anything else. It's the people capital side of things. So this budget reflects that our local economy, as I was saying, has recovered or beginning to recover from the pandemic. And we're in a financial position to move forward with the community's strategic priorities to address school capacity, recreational needs, public safety, human services, all those things, and to support our organization in providing effective services that meet those community needs. The framework for this budget is shown on this slide, and we'll go through each of these in a little more detail in the following slides. But these are the 4 areas that we really focused on as the framework for the FY23 budget.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes.
Sorry, just a really quick question. On the 2 slides ago, the
Yeah.
health and welfare, is that just like the cost of insurance and?
So no, health and welfare represents our social services department, I believe it's now the Comprehensive Services Act dollars, our contributions to our community partners such as United Way, Legal Aid, OAR, all of those, local nonprofits as well.
Got it. Okay.
So the Comprehensive Services Act, what Ryan just referenced, is our monies that are going towards children and folks that are in need of special services. Just so to Ryan to clarify.
Yeah. Foster care expenses is one of the larger things of that, but it is to help with mainly with youth. But yeah, all of those that have those special needs in our community. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Okay, transformative capital investments. So in looking at this, the fiscal year 23 budget, capital budget, is going to fund some really transformational investments in the community, and some of it, including 3 new schools over the next 5 years, the opening of Biscuit Run Park with natural trails and passive recreational areas, the construction of the new courts expansion and renovation in downtown Court Square, which I believe is the largest single project ever undertaken by the county in terms of one single project. There's local funding to achieve nearly universal broadband by 2025 is the goal. Support for affordable housing projects and affordable housing programs, and funding in our transportation leveraging program, which provides local funding to draw down the state funding for road and bike and pedestrian improvements throughout our county. Working differently, our community continues to adapt and grow, and as a government, we have to kind of look at things and work differently in order to keep pace with this. A few of the main highlights in this area is that this budget recommendation will launch a community response team, which is going to be led by the Department of Social Services, and it will include a police officer, a firefighter, EMT, and social worker that's going to respond to calls for individuals in crisis. This program is responding to a troubling growth in the mental health calls for service that we have seen and that have those unique needs. And this program allows us to preserve the fire and rescue and police resources where an urgent medical issue or criminal matter really isn't part of the situation, and allows the social workers to work the situation with individuals during the crisis, but also get them the supportive resources that they may need after. And the funding identified for this particular program is an initiative through the cigarette tax, which took effect in January 1st that I referenced earlier. So that increased revenue allowed us to be able to put this program into place, to have these special needs to respond to these needs differently than what may have been done in the past, and allow for more of that human services mental health approach, as opposed to treating it as a criminal matter, but still having the support of the police and fire services there should they be necessary, but not go to those first as the first means of addressing those types of problems. This budget also recommends using a portion of our ARPA funding in order to fund the sewer connection program for individuals who are in our jurisdiction that were within the jurisdiction for public sewer, I should say, but are currently on septic. There are approximately 250 households at our last count that, because of where they are located, could be connected to the system, but are not. And in many cases, that is due to the cost to connect. And this will provide some relief to that and help allow those individuals to connect to this program. The details are still being worked out as we go through this, and it's being done, that we're working closely with ACSA as a partner on this. And so we'll look at, we'll hopefully be able to come back to the Board of Supervisors soon with a more detailed plan, as we look at that. And Diane, I saw you unmute. Yes.
Yeah, just let me let folks know that when we mapped the locations of homeowners or folks that live in the development area that did not have access to public sewer, what we found was that they were clustered mostly in the Jack Jewett district and in the Rio district. Now, that's not to say there aren't some outside of those two districts, but that's where the clusters were. And of course, the reason is the age of the houses in those districts. The Jewett district has some of the oldest housing in the county. And so many of those were not originally hooked up to public sewer. And the folks that either own those, the folks that own those houses have not been able to afford the $20,000 in hookups. So I'm pretty excited about this sewer connection program. And
A little overdue.
Details to follow. We haven't figured it out, as Ryan says, but obviously there will be some work to figure out who can afford it, who can't. I don't know if it'll be a sliding scale, don't know exactly how it's going to work, but we're working on all that, and staff will come back to us
That's
with
great.
some recommendations.
Right. And in response to a question that Kim had raised at the prior meeting about the owner-occupied prioritization versus renters, that is one of those things that they were looking at, and we brought up to the people in there. And so that's going to be one of those things that is looked at and considered as they work through the details of where to go with that particular program. But since I saw Kim here and I knew she had asked that question at the town hall, I wanted to make sure that I addressed that piece as well. So
Thank you.
no problem. Let's see. Going back to working differently. There's also a recommendation here for on the Yancey Community Center to continue to fund that once the initial 3-year grant expires, as well as 2 temporary engagement positions to support the county's community advisory committees, while we shift resources to focus on the comp plan update, which began a couple months ago, I believe it was. And so just having those engagement coordinators in there to help us getting out and having that higher level of engagement with the community and these community advisory committees as well.
Can you, maybe it's just me, but I don't think I get this.
The engagement coordinator,
So it's just for the comp plan?
that's where Ms. McKeown, I didn't know if you.
I didn't want to interrupt you, Ryan.
No,
but
go right ahead.
I think what Cynthia is getting at is during the period of time when our staff is heavily engaged in the review of the comp plan, which is going to take a significant amount of time, these engagement coordinators, and I can't remember, Ryan, but they're going to be, they're aware as we're advertising it, that they are temporary jobs. They're full-time jobs, but they are temporary in that they last the period of time that we're going to be reviewing the comp plan, which is more than a year, right? I mean, it's going to be, I think, a couple of years, Ryan.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe the thought was 2 years, somewhere in the neighborhood.
So this gets back to our discussion at the last meeting about not having the staff in place to really support all of the CACs as we try and have monthly meetings, remember? And we talked about that, and we have minimal support, and we are really lucky because staff has really worked hard with us to supply us with Carolyn and the folks that we need or have asked for our meetings. But we have, there is really limited support. So everybody's trying to give a little bit, work with each other. But these engagement coordinators, if we're able to hire them, will help with that support. Does that help, Cynthia? And Ryan, I don't think I said anything wrong.
No, you didn't. I think I wasn't very clear with the way you said that a little clearly than what I had done. When I said shift resources to the comp plan, it meant as some of the other resources are shifted towards the comp plan, these positions would come in and kind of fill that void on the engagement side that would be created from that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really curious about what we envision these engagement coordinators doing and being, and who were the kind of people we would hire for them, because, you know, it takes a certain type of person to be able to do that. So anyway, I'm curious. I hope it works. I think it's, you know, it's a good plan if it works.
Urban service delivery. This budget makes many investments in urban levels of service, which includes an urban right-of-way program that includes a street sweeper and vegetation management program to keep the streets clean, as well as a program for right-of-way management to make it faster and to execute bike and pedestrian projects. Funding that includes funding for an on-demand microtransit program in 29 North and Pantops areas, expanding the fire service from the Pantops station to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, investments in our squad-based police staffing model with 2 new officers, as well as investments in economic development and tourism marketing.
Ryan, you may need to flip to the next slide.
But can I ask, is that on the 24/7 staffing for Pantops, is that paid or volunteer or a mix?
On the fire, that is paid staffing. That will be 24/7 paid fire staffing on Pantops.
That's great.
Okay, is there a lag on my computer? Are we not seeing the urban service delivery slide? Because that's what's showing on my.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm wrong. I thought maybe you had another slide that talked about the other items you were mentioning, but what we have is the Pantops and the police officers. So we're probably good.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. And finally, our final area that I want to talk about is the quality of government operations, which is kind of what underpins our ability to execute on the programs and services and projects that our community relies on, and just to stay safe and to keep moving forward. The adopted budget includes a 4% market adjustment for staff to continue to move our organization relative to the market, allow us to retain and recruit people. We're seeing, you know, there's a lot of turnover in this area, and this is hopefully to allow us to be comprehensive in our compensation and classification study as we move forward with that. The recommended budget also supports our ongoing core systems modernization work, which is a fancy way of saying upgrading our enterprise solutions to allow us to more effectively, our computer systems to help us more effectively manage our resources, provide more streamlined customer service experience, you know, kind of touches on everything from our financial systems to HR to community development, just broader customer service management across the board to help with this. It recommends providing a dedicated administrative support and for the recruitment of applications, onboarding for more than the 200 community member positions and the more than 50 boards and commissions of the board and supervisors. And so, as well as, capital project management and other things. And so that is kind of the high level overview of the budget. Be happy to answer any other questions that anyone may have on this.
Let's see,
I have a
Kim has her
question.
hand up.
So back to the slide that had the balanced budget recommendation with all of the property taxes.
Right.
I'm more just curious about the transient occupancy tax,
Mhm.
and if you guys have a sense yet as to the makeup of that revenue stream from Airbnb versus hotels.
The vast majority of that, I don't have the exact breakout in front of me, but the vast majority of this does come from hotels. Airbnbs make up a much smaller portion of this revenue. And like I said, unfortunately, I don't have that exact breakout, but I mean, it is a much smaller portion of the revenue. I would be willing to, I don't want to throw out a number irresponsibly, but
Right.
it's significantly lower.
And they are also subject to this 8%, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That
they
is
are-
my understanding. Yes.
Okay.
Any other question? And I will say that with the food and beverage and the transient occupancy tax, I did mention that brings us in line with the city. However, the city did pass an extra 0.5% on their meals tax. So they've now gone back ahead of the county in terms of rates there.
And I will add, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting you,
No,
Ryan, because you're
by
doing
all
a great
means.
job. I just wanted to tell Kim and those that are on the screen that actually the county has a software package, for lack of a better word, and we are able to screen for lack of again, better word, the Airbnb sites that are advertising online, so that we often catch people that may not realize they're supposed to be paying. Just to add to that conversation. So we're monitoring it. And we also take staff, if someone knows of one that they think is not being, is not following our ordinances, you can report someone, but the truth is that we're monitoring it pretty closely. So we're catching most of them. And it is important because, of course, the folks that are advertising Airbnb need to be having inspections on those houses so that you don't stay in a house that is a fire danger.
Right.
But remember that one a couple years ago that was, this huge house, with multiple bedrooms. It was like a dormitory. And the guy couldn't understand why the neighbors were worked up. It's kind of like, oh, well.
But to answer Kim's question, I think is what she was getting at, is we are monitoring those sites and staff is aware when one pops up, right?
And it's not just Airbnb. I think there are some other
No.
sites too that.
No, it's bed and breakfast pay their fair
Yeah.
share, right?
Yeah.
Everybody needs to be paying their
Right.
fair share, not just one group. That's right.
We have, that's our revenue administration department really looks at that closely and has I believe they're called a tax auditor position that goes out and makes sure that, there's someone that they're all of a sudden aren't paying their taxes. Why is that? Is it because they're no longer providing that service or what? And so they are looking for that, and also looking for new, as Supervisor McKeel said, looking for those new places that are popping up at those new places that are advertising in our area to make sure we're catching all of those.
But then I guess my other point was that it's more about not just about the revenues, but making sure that people are staying in short stay rentals that are safe.
Correct.
That they have been monitored, that we know that they have the right exits if it catches on fire, that the fire department goes over and inspects to make sure the windows aren't painted shut in case of a fire, those sorts of things. And
Right.
of course, somehow or another, we have to pay for that service. So anyway, sorry, Ryan.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, that's one of those things where if they want to get that business license, they have to make sure they have all the proper certifications and inspections before they can do that. And so that's part of that job is identifying that, and then, through the communication, interdepartmental communication, passing that along to the inspectors and to the fire safety folks to make sure that everything is properly inspected and certified before they can move forward with those.
We also should be making sure we find the places where people are renting out long-term rooms, but not telling anyone. The houses that have 6 cars parked in front of them.
There's a lot of them.
Good luck with that.
And Chris, most of that, and I think maybe Ryan could speak to that maybe, but I would say that that's complaint driven.
Yeah.
Because, and if we don't, if they're not, if there's nothing that, if neighbors don't turn in a complaint, then we don't know about it. And if a complaint is submitted, then staff, goes out and investigates.
Yeah, I'd have to defer to someone in community development, probably to make sure, because that sounds like it's more of a zoning issue than anything else. And so they probably would be able to answer that a little bit better than I could.
Well, if they're paying rent, we deserve a section of the rent too, right? Right?
But basically what you're describing is complaint driven.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, we don't know about it unless someone reports.
Mhm.
All righty.
I have a quick question about capital projects.
Sure.
And we have a small capital project in our area that didn't happen last year. I don't know if it's paid for by the schools, Diantha might know, but the walking trail that connects Greer and Jewett and the new Boys and Girls Club. Would that have rolled into this year's budget, or is that a separate area?
Actually, that's in the works, Rosemary. It really hasn't been delayed. Part of the issue was the bid came in, I think, a little different than we expected, but they are also trying to we're trying to coordinate that sidewalk with the Boys and Girls Club and what they were doing. So, but my understanding is that sidewalk is, will be completed.
Oh, great.
I'm
Yep.
hoping that they'll be starting it this spring so that it'll be open in time for the summer or for school opening. I don't know, Ryan, if you're familiar with that particular project or not.
I'm not familiar with the timeline of it, but I will say I do know it is underway, and it's I don't know exactly which phase. They move so quickly. I would believe it's still in the planning phase
Great.
at this point, getting
Yeah,
ready to move to the construction phase. So I'm just not 100%.
It's
I just
my
wanted to make sure-
understanding it will happen this summer.
Yeah,
And
I
Boys
believe
and
so.
Girls Club will be opening for this school year, although every time I drive by it, I'm amazed that it could. They've got a lot of work to do.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure it wasn't, if projects don't get done, they don't get written out of the budget process, but that sounds great.
We look at with those capital projects, we look at those each year for those ones that are in progress or whatever, what needs to be carried over to the next fiscal year. Unless they say the project's no longer going to happen, we're not in the process of completely removing those from the budget.
Well, thank you all for your questions. And Ryan, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're running a little bit behind, but we will move right into Gabe Daly, our Climate Protection Program Manager. Gabe is with Albemarle County, and he will provide an overview of the county's climate action program. Thank you, Gabe.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Yolanda. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for having me back. I think I actually did a presentation with this CAC last year around this time. I was very recently started in the current position that I'm in. So nice to be back. And I'm making the rounds at all of the CACs this month. So getting to say hello to different parts of the county. Let me pull up my screen share here. All right, can you see the full page of the screen? Excellent. So for this evening, and I'll kind of shorten things a little bit just to make sure you all end on time, and that there's time for questions and discussion. But I wanted to share just a brief thought, kind of framing the presentation for tonight, and some of the work that we've done, and then I'll give a very brief climate protection program update, and won't spend as much time on context since I had a chance to speak with your CAC last year. So I'll kind of fill in a little bit of some of where we've been since then. And then part of the reason that Rachel and her team invited me to come to the CACs this month was to talk a little bit about intersections between county climate action and the comprehensive plan update, because that process recently kicked off, and there are certainly intersections there. So I'll share a little bit about that just as kind of food for thought and discussion, and then share a little bit about some different ways that you can get involved in local climate action at the county level, and also kind of generally in our community. So first off, I just wanted to say, I think sometimes this isn't always said, especially in the context of kind of government or professional policy conversations, but there's more and more research lately saying that it's helpful to just acknowledge that climate change is really big and can sometimes feel overwhelming. And, that's okay. And kind of whatever your reaction is to the climate crisis, what you see in the news or what you hear about on, the radio or podcasts or whatever it might be, if kind of being aware of that actually helps us move towards action. And then the third thing I wanted to say is that you can be part of the solution. There's a role and value to all of us being involved, and particularly with community advisory committees, you each have a unique role in that you're in somewhat of a position of kind of community leadership in this group. And so there's some agency there that just wanted to say as a kind of way of empowering folks to think about how you can take action and support the county's climate action goals. So for the program update, this will be refresher probably for most of you, although it was a year ago. In 2020, October, the Board of Supervisors adopted the first climate action plan for the county. And that climate action plan really aims to be in line with the county's vision in terms of supporting local health and well-being, our economy, the local environment, and local equity and inclusion in the context of also seeking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce our contribution to global climate change. The plan, you might recall, has 5 main areas or 5 main chapters of strategies and actions that are addressed. So we have actions in the realm of transportation and land use, actions that look at building energy use that includes both energy efficiency, so thinking about insulation, your appliances, light bulbs, but also looking at renewable energy generation on the site of people's homes or commercial buildings, often rooftop solar. We also have some actions in the plan that focus on renewable energy sourcing at a slightly larger scale. While that photo in the bottom left is a rooftop installation, a lot of the actions in that section of the plan look at kind of larger solar installations. We have a number of actions that look at sustainable materials management, and the plastic bag tax that Ryan mentioned earlier in this evening's meeting is one example of some of the efforts that the county is engaged in to help reduce material waste. And then we have actions related to landscape, natural resources, and agriculture. So you might have seen a couple slides ago, I mentioned that the Board of Supervisors had set targets, quantitative targets for emissions reduction in the county. And specifically, they set 2 that are in line with kind of global scientific standards of the kinds of emission reductions that we need to get to as a global community if we're going to reduce the severity of climate change. So reducing by 45% of emissions by 2030 and achieving 0 net emissions by 2050. On the right is a pie chart of our most recent greenhouse gas emission inventory which is for the year 2018. And we're actually currently in the process of doing an updated inventory for 2020. There's always about a 2-year lag between when we can produce, between the year in question and when we can produce a report, because of some of the information and data taking time to become available that we get from federal government and state government sources. But doing those greenhouse gas emission inventories on a regular basis, we have committed to do them every 2 years, is our main tool for monitoring progress toward meeting those targets. And I'll come back, keep that pie chart in your mind. You'll see it again in a few slides when we talk a little bit about climate action and the comprehensive plan update. This is just another view of the inventory information and our trajectory in terms of emissions. So the orange line is actual inventories that the county has done in the past, 2000, 2006, 2008, and 2018. And then the dashed green line is an idealized line of an emissions reduction trajectory towards the targets.
Yay.
So that's something we can talk about a little bit more. Yeah, and so Cynthia, I don't know if you're saying yay because of this, but a couple folks have commented that there's already somewhat of a downward trend from 2008 to 2018, which is good. And if there's time, happy to chat a little bit more about kind of why we think that is. But it's great that we're moving in the right direction. And of course, we would like to see a steepening of that downward curve, but it's good certainly that we saw some reduction between 08 and 18.
Well, I mean, sometimes I think, especially young people, but and even old farts like me, I mean, I think a lot of people feel hopeless when it comes to, climate and where we're heading. And I think, to be able to talk about we're making progress but we have a lot more work to do, I think is a powerful thing.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think that's really well said. So with our current climate program, I'll give you a little bit more of a visual of this in a moment, but just broadly speaking, the climate program has 2 main areas of activity and work. And the green box on the left is some of our main work with implementing the climate action plan that we have. So that plan provides us a guide towards the kind of work that we can do. And then we've also taken up the work of climate adaptation and resilience planning. Some kind of jargon technical terms that you'll sometimes hear is that climate action that is seeking to reduce our impact is called mitigation, so mitigating the intensity of climate change. And then you'll see these terms adaptation and resilience. And that's really about preparing for some of the changes that are already here and that we know are coming that will intensify just because of not enough collective global action for the last few decades. So there's some amount of change that's baked in, and we want to make sure that we can prepare for that as a community. So that's another large effort that we're embarking on and are just finishing up with the first step, which was to do a vulnerability and risk assessment to better understand what kinds of vulnerabilities we have specifically here in Albemarle County in the context of the kinds of intense kind of weather changes that we expect in the Piedmont region of Virginia. So this kind of wild screen is a simplified version of a website that I was going to show you, but just is kind of a map of our program, and it's moving left to right along with how you might visualize a time arrow going from 0 forward in time. But these are those 2 main aspects of the climate program. And so on top in the green is a number of activities related to implementing the climate action plan. At the very top is work that we're doing as a local government to make our operations more sustainable and try to lead by example. And then the middle row of dark green is some of the work that we're engaged in now to implement the climate action plan and also try to increase the degree to which we're implementing it in a strategic way that's likely to be successful. Some of you might be familiar with that acronym SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. We're working to increase that specificity and measurability of the actions and strategies in our climate action plan so that we can be more strategic with how we implement it. And then down below is the climate resilience planning. And so the vulnerability assessment that I mentioned is going to in some ways directly inform the resilience plan, but it's also going to inform a planning process that we're going to engage with staff, local community partners, members of the community, and those will help us move towards some of our goals. This is just a more detailed version of that to help us track things that we have online. So climate action and the comprehensive plan update. So you might remember that pie chart from a few slides ago. And I want to emphasize that understanding the sources and distribution of greenhouse gas emissions in the county will help us integrate climate action into the comprehensive plan update better, because it'll allow us to see, well, where are their greatest emissions, and so where are there the biggest opportunities potentially to reduce those emissions. So this just gives you another kind of visual. It's the same chart, just with a different color. And you can see that transportation emissions are the largest, just over 52%. And then building emissions come in second at almost 40% of emissions. I should say, this doesn't capture all the emissions in the county, and that has to do with data access. We're doing some work to try to increase the data that we can collect, and then make sure that we show, an apples to apples comparison over time. So we want to get better about making sure we're trying to capture more information. One example would be like off-road vehicles, such as work vehicles that might be doing landscaping in a particular park or on a property. For example, we're not able to capture those emissions because of how transportation data gets reported. We're working with VDOTs, basically the traffic counters that you sometimes drive over on the roads, and that gives you vehicle miles traveled. So transportation is vehicles on public roads. But just wanted to mention that caveat. So to talk a little bit about transportation, the biggest one here, if you saw the growth management report, background report that Rachel and her colleagues prepared in the last, prepared and published in the last couple of weeks, I'm sure they were preparing it for more than just a couple of weeks. I thought this was a really interesting and helpful graphic that they shared, and wanted to flag a couple of things for you. The first off is just interesting. This was from the American Community Survey between 2015 and 2019. Already at that point, there was a decent percentage of folks working from home in the county, and certainly that spiked during COVID, but maybe will plateau off at a percentage that's slightly higher than that current number. The main numbers that I wanted to highlight for you here are these somewhat low numbers that, from a climate action perspective, as well as a kind of community health and well-being perspective, we would love to see those numbers increase as a percentage of how folks are getting around the community. So that kind of begs a question: how can growth management and land use decisions help us increase those percentages and make it easier for folks to make that choice? So these are not all the answers. This is not comprehensive, but these are just a couple of kind of ideas that I wanted to toss out there and pose for the group to chew on tonight, as well as kind of going forward as part of the comp plan update process. But one is thinking about complete streets, which is kind of a fun term for streets that have good space for cars, cyclists, and pedestrians, but not just the functional space, they're also pleasant to be on. So there's trees with shade and some greenery, things like that. Density often comes up in these kinds of conversations. So increasing the density can do a number of things, but it can make it easier to access transit. It can make it easier for different kinds of connectivity when there's slightly denser housing in the development areas. Infill development is the idea of taking land that's currently unused, maybe was previously used, old parking lots, things like that, and developing housing for folks or more commercial space, rather than kind of expanding further out at the edges of the community. And then thinking about parking and kind of how much real estate we often provide to cars, maybe even sometimes more real estate than necessary. Sometimes you see giant parking lots that are only half full, even when the stores are pretty busy. Those are a few things around transportation that we think about. Then I also wanted to mention buildings briefly, and a few kind of elements of food for thought for buildings supporting climate action within the comp plan process. So electrification is talked about a lot these days. That's moving over towards more electric appliances from fossil fuel powered appliances, thinking about ways that our comprehensive plan and other kind of guiding documents for the county can help encourage solar energy systems and adaptive building reuse. The last one I wanted to mention, I won't go into waste tonight, but I did want to mention agriculture just because this one is kind of deceptive here. It shows emissions from raising livestock, but it misses quite a bit because of access to data that, again, we hope to increase our access and the information that we can provide. But we did have an appendix in our most recent greenhouse gas inventory that talked about something related to agriculture, forestry, and landscape that's sort of hidden behind the scenes here. And that is the county's forests, which actually have quite a bit of cover in the county, and they're helping us out a lot. They're sequestering or drawing down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at almost 1 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. We didn't count this in our favor in our greenhouse gas inventory because this isn't the result necessarily of policies that we're currently doing with the climate action plan. But it's helpful to see how much our forests are helping us, and also, of course, the importance of then protecting those forests as much as we can to prevent kind of the opposite phenomenon of more emissions coming from our landscape. So that, of course, is a conversation that certainly becomes part of comprehensive plan when we think about growth management and some of the past priorities that the Board of Supervisors has had around development areas, rural area, and those kinds of conversations in the county. So I just wanted to show this as an interesting example, as a kind of visual map of the greenery in the county and how it's helping out. So I'll conclude with a few ways that you can get involved. The first one is that we launched on Earth Day the result of a collaboration between several colleagues and myself. We created an environmental stewardship hub on the county website. And I'll take you there in a second just to show you what's there. But it gives people, folks in the community, a very kind of easy, quick access way to learn in relatively simple, accessible terms about key environmental programs in the county. And then also to learn about different ways that you can get involved, different actions that you can take in the community or at home, as well as resources, both kind of technical, educational, and some cost share resources for doing some of those things. So I will show you here. So this is what the actual page looks like on the website. If I were to click into any one of these areas, you'd get to a page where you can learn a little bit more about those programs, and what the county is trying to do, what our goals are. And then you can see different ways that you can make a difference and kind of toggle along here between different types of actions. I'll show you one example, the ones at home. It's quite a long list of different things that folks can do. And we really tried to aim for offering language in a way that's accessible, that's kind of simple and short. So for example, not too much text, short paragraphs, but linking to more in-depth resources. If someone says, oh, I really want to try to do this and how can I learn more? I could click into some of these resources to learn more in depth. We also tried to pay attention to what are some of these resources that are kind of behavioral that anyone can do, renters and homeowners. Some of these are things that certainly would require owning the property, like going solar. But we were mindful of kind of making sure that we had a variety of options or different ways that folks can kind of jump in and get engaged. So we're excited about this. Took a lot to put into it, and we launched on Earth Day. It's kind of good timing there. One of the main purposes I'll add is that before this page, if you went to the county website to try to learn about what's the county doing with our watershed, and what's the county doing on climate action or biodiversity, often you would have to click in multiple pages of depth to find what you were looking for. And in particular, there were some cost share resources for homeowners or landowners wanting to engage in better stewardship of their own land from an environmental perspective. And the cost share resource page was buried several layers in. So we wanted to make those a little bit easier for folks to access.
This is great.
To make use of. So I stuck the link to this is in the PowerPoint presentation. So you can feel free to check it out yourself. at your leisure. Just two more things. I mentioned earlier that one of our main program activities is about to be launching the climate adaptation and resilience planning process. We'll, like the comp plan, be doing a community process there, a lot of community engagement. And so, certainly an invitation to participate, be a part of that. And then I wanted to make sure to plug for my colleagues' work, engaging with the AC 44, the comp plan update. They have a fantastic engagement website dedicated to this process. And these links are in the PowerPoint that I sent, that you all should have access to attached to the agenda. So yeah, that's it for me. Thanks so much for listening. I'll close out of the screen share just so we can see each other, but happy to bring something back up if you want to.
Hello, are there any questions?
I just think it's encouraging, I mean, it's, it's one of those things I think, that people worry about and it's good that we're, to not only show that the county's dealing with it, but that we have some interesting data and stories to tell. So, cool.
I have a question. I think, inventories are fine, but I'm like, I like to see like real actionable things happen. So a couple different areas that I'm just curious how the county is going to address longer term is what I'm going to focus on Parks and Rec. So in Charlotte Humphreys Park, as we've got this little forested area, like how is the county thinking about utilizing its internal resources to keep the park, as functioning as a nice park and a nice forested park? And is the county going to look at ways to, help the park system stay vibrant? And I'm not just talking about, the amenities part, but the actual maintenance part. So that's one question. And then years ago, like the county had embarked on a, community engagement thing about, environmental things. And I had mentioned the oil tank removal program that's at the state level really could be a thing that the county could help residents get a better understanding about how that works. So if more and more people are switching to a heat pump, it might be helpful to help guide people as to how the state's oil tank removal program works, which has the unfortunate name of LUST, the leaking underground storage tank program. So anyway, I think that would be maybe another useful thing to throw out somehow to help people with it. Just getting rid of an oil tank, or if they're making this fuel switch, that would be helpful. And then the last one is, does the Economic Development Authority put any kind of performance agreement metrics when they are seeking, if somebody comes to the county seeking some kind of support for a project, and if it's like a building related thing, that the county says you got to make sure that you're doing this to address your energy consumption or something? I don't know. So those are my questions.
Those are all really great questions. So first with parks, yes. So the first area kind of on that, the flow chart moving from left to right at the very top, we have this, just a visual reference. But so within our looking to improve sustainability of local government operations, we have 4 areas of work that are ongoing right now. Looking at we're working to prepare a green building policy, greening up our fleet, and then the third one is working on landscape management. And so that does include parks, and it does include more than amenities. It includes things like looking at sort of the landscape management, both from an invasive species perspective, managing those, and then also looking at how we can promote native plant species that are often better at carbon sequestration, as long as they can be kind of, get a footing in place of the invasives. We're also looking at how we do kind of management in terms of mowing. A lot of folks have given feedback to the county about, hey, that's like low hanging fruit. Can we mow a little bit less often in certain areas where active recreation is not happening? So there's a number of things on the table that we're looking at with parks. Great point about the oil tank removal, and I will look into that to see if we can get something on the that stewardship club. So we do have actions around encouraging folks, if they can, to electrify, along with some links to resources. So I'll see if we can include some information then kind of on the other side is, if you do that, then how do you deal with what you have? And the third one, can you mention the third one again?
That was it.
Oh, you're muted.
Kim, you're muted.
The Economic Development Authority's role and how the county interacts with that organization.
Yeah, so, well, I can't speak as much to the Economic Development Authority. I've definitely had some conversations with the staff in the Economic Development Office, and we've talked about some ways that we can collaborate. I haven't personally, had the opportunity yet to connect with folks in the EDA, but definitely working with staff on ways that we can kind of that they can help to promote climate action in their work, and I know that they're very aware of the climate action plan. So there have been some opportunities for movement there.
All right, well, thank you, Kim. Gabe, you have a few more questions. I see Julian, I see Kate, I see Chris, and I also see Jane Fogelman.
Thank you, Chair. So I just have a sort of couple of clarification questions. Kim and I have had this conversation about sort of the push to HVACs and understanding that our climate is not necessarily, for certain income groups, a place that really is accessible for HVACs, unless you have highly efficient HVACs, which then can go for something like $20,000 to have them installed. And so this push for electrification comes, I will be kind when I say it, actually points to a bunch of individuals who have a certain income stream. And so as you're laying that out there as a suggestion, I would hope that you're sensitive to the fact that not everybody's no one has the ability, well, I shouldn't say it that way, but it is, some people are restricted in their budgets and being able to purchase a high SEER equipment. And then there's the whole point of maintaining that equipment. When people talk about, they often neglect to talk about what's the downstream cost once you have this installed. And so thinking about how do you create a suite of solutions that actually works across a number of budgets and doesn't look like it's a solution that really leans towards an affluence that I'll just leave it there. And then the other thing, that the whole idea of electrification, let us not forget, in order to generate electricity, unless we're doing windmills or we're doing complete solar, it's got to be generated by some type of plant, which is often still at this point in Virginia, it's a coal-fired power plant. Or if we're pulling some of our power from Lake Huron, then you may be pulling in a bit of nuclear power. But most of our power is still, right at this point, until some of the projects offshore come, they're going to be based on fossil fuels or based on coal. And so thinking about what does that shift really do for the environment if we are really encouraging people to go in that direction. And then if I could just suggest that one piece you had about transportation, the real winner would be if we could get people out of individual cars. Because even if you were to do the three things that you said, that's only a 5.7% of the population, or shall I say, what's being generated there. The real piece that's being generated there is the number of individuals who are doing solo rides in their vehicles. Now, I think if the county continues to do what they've done down at the county office building, which is to invest in the charging points down there, or to do a P3 with other places around town, then in fact you start building the infrastructure that people can make decisions on when they do a replacement. What are we replacing my vehicle for if I'm doing local driving? If it becomes annoying to get charged, then I'm going to do the thing that's easiest for me. If it becomes less annoying for me to get charged, then I'm going to look at some of the alternatives which are coming on, particularly since the market's starting to sort of ramp up and there's still rebates. So if you can get it, you can get a rebate for an electric vehicle. Again, that's a side of affluence, but I would safely say the number of those people who are driving those 75% might have a good percentage who could afford to go if the infrastructure was there, who might be considering local vehicles or local vehicles for local transportation that were electric. So that's basically it. Let's be careful how we direct people to HVACs, because that's got a cost associated with it. Let's be careful when we talk about the electrification, because electrification has to be generated unless it's being generated by solar or it's generated by wind. And if it's not being generated with that, there are costs associated with that. And also to think about what's the downstream sort of maintenance cost of these systems that we're asking people to come in, that we're asking people to put in, just sort of think about converting to.
Yeah, Julian, really great points. I know there's other hands, so I'll just say a couple quick things. Thanks for mentioning the piece around equity, and I'll acknowledge a lot of the actions that are kind of invited or encouraged on the What You Can Do page, do require some kind of amount of financial input, and we're aware of that. Whenever possible, we try to include access to resources to do so. For the HVAC, for the sort of appliance electrification, I think that's one of the ones I'm most excited about the county's work, because we partner with local organizations like LEAP, Local Energy Alliance Program, and Albemarle Housing Improvement Program, where they work with folks who don't necessarily have financial means to be able to add insulation to their homes or upgrade their furnace or hot water heater. So that's great work that I hope we will continue to do more of. I know the board is interested in continuing to fund it. And then for the one thing I should share, and this is true with like stationary appliances in homes and with electric vehicles, because folks often raise that concern of like, what about the fact that our electric grid is still very much fossil fuels? Pretty much by and large, you get some savings when you switch over to electric. There's like a kind of automatic on that day, because electric appliances or electric vehicles are more energy efficient. So it's like they'll take you the same amount of distance for less energy, which then converts to fewer emissions. Or with the appliances, they'll kind of create the same amount of heat for a little bit less energy drawing from the grid than if you use the same kind of units of energy, calculating those from the gas in your home. The other benefit with electrification is that it has a built-in, assuming that our country continues to act and move towards a cleaner electric grid, it kind of builds in a built-in increase in efficiency as the grid gets cleaner. So those are some of the things that we think about when trying to promote that transition. I won't call on.
Okay, thank you. It was Kate, then Chris, then Jane.
Just a couple of things. As both Gabe and Diantha know, the school board has set up an advisory committee on environmental sustainability, not only to look at how we educate our kids about climate change, but to better coordinate with the county action plan. Having said that, although we're not the biggest contributor to either transportation or buildings, we are the biggest contributor of governmental entities in the county on both of those counts. We do have schools, several with solar, and we have one windmill that wasn't built as high as it needed to be for efficiency because of height restrictions in the county. And we have, with our new Crozet Elementary School addition, we'll be powered by geothermal, but that was only because we would have had to replace the boiler and the cost difference wasn't that much. All of our solar, all of our environmentally, non-carbon based energy sources come with a cost that we do not so far build into the capital project costs. We have done them all with public-private partnerships, but it's very distressing for me. I toured both Walton Middle School and then K-Tech last week and K-Tech this week. And so they have roofs, solar-ready roofs, but no solar. And we have that all over the county. And we need to build into the costs of our additions or our new buildings. So, and I know, Gabe, you said you were going to be putting out building guidelines, but I know there's a lot of jurisdictions that even DC, Arlington, and Baltimore, which are building net zero schools. And they are certainly not more flush economically than we are. And we need to build that into the capital budgets, or we're not going to get it done.
I
Thank
definitely
you,
agree.
Chris?
And I apologize, but I need to scoot. I'm going to the Lighted Up Green event at County Office Building, where my organization is the coordinator. And I will see you all next time.
Thank you. Have a good night, Kate. Chris? Then Jane?
I thought that was a very good presentation. There are a couple things though, in terms of the accounting of where carbon dioxide comes from. It's basically only looks at what's generated in our county. Whereas if you look on a nationwide scale, other things are much more important. For example, transportation and buildings will be proportionally less, and food is greater. Food's about 30% of CO2 emissions. And so one of the things that can be done by everyone is that the major producers of the things in food that produce CO2 is beef and lamb. And by cutting down on those, you're going to actually have a lot less CO2 production. The second thing that's not included is the cost or the CO2 production and things that we import to do building. For example, concrete is about 8% of CO2 emissions. And so we're not accounting for the things that are brought in or made CO2 generation other places. And so new buildings are going to be a big problem too that needs to be accounted for. And then there's just two other comments I have. I have a hybrids electric car, and now the state charges for when registration, it charges about a $90 per year charge for an electric vehicle. So we're actually going the wrong way in terms of encouraging electric vehicles. And so, they say it's because we don't pay the gas tax, but that's still a pretty lousy reason to put an extra charge on it if you want people to electrify. Finally,
And Chris, I just want to say to Gabe, that should be on our legislative packet for this coming fall. If you'll make a note to remind us, we need to push for that. Thank you, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah. And the last thing is we don't always encourage things that are good for the environment. For example, if you actually have a garden like we do, where we grow food that we eat, that's still charged as if I was watering my lawn. And so it ends up our water bill gets to be relatively high. And there should be some system to account for that for people that are growing food, because that should be a relatively encouraged thing rather than a discouraged thing in terms of the Rivanna water and sewer things. And finally, I noticed there was a picture of compost collection as opposed to composting in your own property. And other places do that. They do that in like Silicon Valley, and that hasn't been encouraged here. And I think that would be a good idea, especially since at least our area, well, this whole area around here, we have a problem with pests getting into compost heaps. So, and you probably all know about that, but Emerald County all over has a big rat problem, and composting, unless you're controlling your composting is not a great idea.
That's helpful information. We're one of the actions in the materials management chapter is looking at how we can expand access to those more centralized composting facilities. But I didn't know that. It's good to know. One other quick thing I'll say is that we did look at, and I think it might require sort of expansion in staff bandwidth to get there. But we had looked at doing a consumption-based emission inventory at one point, which would capture some of those kinds of things you're talking about, of like high consumption, that where the emissions technically occur in a factory in China, but the sort of the demand for that is maybe coming from me.
We own it, no matter where it's made, right?
Jane Fogelman? You're muted.
This is for Kim and for Chris. Chris, you can take your compostable materials to the city market or to the recycle at McIntyre, and they do take compostable materials there.
We generate on the order of a 55-gallon garbage can about every week.
Take it. They take it.
We can't fit it in our car and we don't have a truck.
Get two buckets. The other, Kim, there is a policy with underground tanks that they have to be tested, and especially when they are sold, we always do that. And there's a company called Pollard that comes in. It's a state program and it's free to the homeowner. They will test for oil contamination of the soil. They will either remove the tank or remediate it, which is you put sand in it and that sort of thing. If it's not leaking, you put sand. And then they will do, if there is some surf or some oil contamination around the tank area, they will then start drilling test wells out, and they're very, very good, and it's very, very reliable for soil contamination of oil. So rest easy.
And I know we have John Lewis that has a question too, and these are really great questions and great discussion. I am just trying to be sort of keep an eye on the time, recognizing that we're running short. And I will say, Gabe, well, it's okay. I was just going to say, Gabe, we have to have you back again because we're really interested in this topic. And John, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's two things really. One is this is all great, and I think we're all supportive. The problem is we're a culture of convenience and cost, and right now, unless you incentivize people to behave better or have better habits, right now we only incentivize it with cost savings, which is usually a net revenue decrease for the county. I think the alternative is how do you make bad habits more expensive? But that's sort of out of scope here. I think the bigger issue is nothing's going to change until alternate routes to driving alone is more convenient and safer. And if that, we're kind of beholden to the VDOT and we can't really control a lot of things, but we really should be driving VDOT to incentivize safer streets, slower speed limits, not building more lanes to save on traffic, but instead, slowing traffic down and building more bike lanes or pedestrian connectivity to encourage the use of alternate means of transport other than cars, parking lots for, let people who are driving in from the country come in to parking areas where they can then bike or something. So until that happens, it's great that we're doing this stuff, but it's lip service to the fact the majority of our constituency and users of traffic are convenient. It's convenient and cheaper to drive alone than it is, and safer. So yeah, until we can get VDOT to start funding this, until we come up with a master plan for connected communities via non-car alternatives, this is, it's going to be a real struggle. Thanks.
And just a suggestion, as we're going through the comp plan review, one of the problems we have in our community is neighborhoods resist connectivity. Everybody talks about connectivity except for their neighborhood. And Fairfax solved that problem by creating an ordinance that said, when developments happen, there will be connectivity. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I've said that we need to maybe think about getting there with our comp plan review. Having said that, that doesn't really solve the problem of the older neighborhoods where we have to go in and actually purchase right of way. You know this, Chris. I'm just saying though, I agree with you about the connectivity, and we have to tackle that on multiple fronts. Sorry to interrupt again.
Diane.
These are great points. I don't have anything to add at the moment, but I appreciate that exchange just now and just jotting down a couple notes for me to think about. Sorry, I interrupted you, Jane.
No, I wanted to ask Diantha on that last statement she made. Is there any update that you all can give us? Probably don't have time tonight, but for the next meeting on the proposed subdivision at the corner of Old Ivy Road and 250 bypass?
I honestly don't know where that proposal stands, and I can ask Julian if he's heard anything.
I've been hearing just an incredible clamor about it.
Right.
And I've said, I'm sorry, I don't know anything.
Yeah, the last I heard, it had been put on pause because the developer had pages of responses to make back to our staff about the project. And have Julian, that hasn't been scheduled on your all's agenda?
There's not been scheduled on anything that I had before me at this point. But Jane, I will say that you probably are hearing a good bit of angst from the community that's right next to it.
No,
And
lots of other places.
well, let me finish. And that the community just a little bit down the road has got some angst with it.
Yeah.
And I will also share with you that the community right next to it is been engaged in some negotiations on perhaps there's a way for them to figure this out or not figure this out. I don't know the answer to that. All I can say is that from what I understand, that the developer hasn't put anything on our calendar that I can see at this particular point in time. Maybe it's probably moving somewhere else, but it's not on anything that I've seen. And we haven't done a revised sort of community. We had that piece that they came, but it would come to us again, I believe, depending on when we see something more reliable. And so there are a few sticking points that I understand, but I haven't seen anything that looks like it's ready for the Planning Commission to look at it.
Certainly, it was not ready for prime time when it came to us the first time. So I think the developers are trying to figure out how to respond and answer questions that our staff had. And we are just a few minutes away. Gabe, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to have you back again, right?
Sounds good. I'm always happy to. I appreciate everyone's comments and questions.
Thank you so much, Gabe. So we have a couple of minutes if we want to try to hear from Diantha and Julian.
Julian, you want to go first?
Yeah, I would just say two very quick things about developments that we have heard from. So some of you will recall that there was a project called the Heritage on Rio that's in front of the rehab or the rehab hospital or rehab. I don't know if it's now rehab, but it was a rehab.
Charlottesville Rehab.
Yeah, Charlottesville Rehab. That has been deferred to the Planning Commission. I don't know why, because all we did was vote for a deferral. But they came to the commission, asked for a deferral, and so that's coming, I think, in June or July. The next one that's coming for us next week is on Barracks Road, something called the Foster Forge Farm School, which is across from Montview, just on the south side of Barracks Road, before what many of you know as the other school project out there that I can't remember the name of. Diantha, you know the name of the school. I can't remember.
Field School. Field School.
And Field School. Right before the Field School. That's coming. We had a community meeting here, but it's coming before us next Monday night. So if you have an interest, or if you have comments, or if you have thoughts, it would be really helpful if you would send those to the Planning Commission, or if you have something that you'd like to say, to sign up to be able to speak at that public hearing next week.
And I'll jump in because we really are down to about 1 minute, but we do have to, I'm not going to give my updates. I'm just going to say we have an issue with the date of our next meeting.
Oh, okay.
We are scheduled, and we need to talk about this. We are scheduled for June the 20th, which is the third Monday. The third Monday is really a problem because there are lots of things that happen on the third Mondays of the months, like Martin Luther King and all of that. We probably at some point need to revisit our third Monday date. Having said that, the third Monday in June is June 10th, and the county office building is closed and staff have a holiday. So what I'm suggesting is that, and Rachel can jump in if she needs to with this, but our June 20th meeting is going to need to be rescheduled so that we have staff, Carolyn and folks to help us with it, even though it's our agenda. And I'd already scheduled Harriet from the IRC and Stacy from Social Services to come and talk to us about affordable housing and the IRC. We're going to need to switch up those folks and see if they can still come. But I was going to suggest that we move it to the Monday, the 13th, if that works for folks. The choice is to move it forward or backwards, the 13th or the 27th. And I was
Okay,
afraid-
both of those nights I have meetings.
Well, I understand, but
You can't meet without me unless you're meeting in person. I
right.
have a CAC. Oh, no,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
that's-
I take
oh,
that
that's-
back. The 13th, I probably do not have a CAC.
So Carolyn, you're very important, and I wasn't sure where that voice was coming from. So it's
Sorry.
Carolyn.
Sorry. I think we can do the 13th unless something changes. I don't think the Village of Rivanna is meeting right now.
Okay, right. I don't
So-
know. They are not meeting right now. We know that for sure.
Okay, then I could move you all to the 13th if that's agreeable.
So I'm going to suggest then to get
That
us
works.
out here on time quickly if possible. We'll send out an email and plan on moving that meeting to the 13th. If I'm seeing the nodding of heads, if that's okay, recognizing that we're moving a meeting, maybe not everybody can make it, but if we can get the vast majority of you, that would be great. But mainly I need to see if I can get our speakers moved to the 13th. So I'll work on that and then get back to you all if at all, if that's reasonable. Does that work, Yolanda, as chair?
Yes,
and
that's
everybody?
work. That works fine.
Okay, just trying to move this along. So,
So, okay.
yeah. And the other thing I wanted to tell you was the board is going to be discussing on Wednesday at our meeting, the COVID restrictions and the policies. And for right now, my understanding, we'll be discussing, we're a tier 3, which means that the community advisory groups are tier 3. They're going to update us on when the tier 3 groups will be moving to in-person, but my anticipation is it's not going to be until probably the end of the summer. So we'll probably have at least the June meeting by Zoom, maybe the August meeting, but we'll let you all know as we have that discussion. I don't even know right now. So the concern is right now, our positivity rate is going way up, according to the health department. Hospitalizations are going up. Wear your mask and be careful, because even people that are vaccinated and boosted are getting sick.
Yep.
Just saying. And with that, Yolanda, if it works, then I'll just leave us unless somebody has something else they need to make a comment about. And I will be in touch by email. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, and Rosemary, I would give you the gold star if I could for your minutes. I really have to take a minute and just thank you for keeping us together with those wonderful minutes. Between you and Carolyn, I don't know how we would, I mean, I know that Yolanda and Kim agree, because you guys are the glue between the minutes and the Zooming right now. It's working and I appreciate it. So with that, Yolanda, I guess we're ready to, and I think Yolanda's gone. Is she gone? I can't see her. She may
Yeah,
be.
she had asked me to do the close then. so-
Okay, there you go, Kim. I'm gonna turn it
Yeah.
over to you.
All right, so we will expect an email with an update on the change for the June meeting, and at this time, then we can adjourn this meeting. Have a good evening.
Thank you, guys. Be safe.